Well, welcome to the Skillwork Forum. I'm Brett Elliott, normally, as you know, and I'm usually joined by my partner, Tim Ragland. But today we are unsupervised. Mr. Mike Matlock, the VP of Sales at Skillwork. And so today we're going to talk about, we just recently got back from Pack Expo East out in Philadelphia. And so we wanted to come on today and just do a recap of that show. Hopefully you'll find it beneficial to just kind of hear what we're hearing. So that's kind of the goal of doing these recaps. So Mike, what'd you see, was the biggest difference between this show versus, some of the others? We were recently at IPPE in Atlanta and then a few other shows, but what this Pack Expo East, what was your takeaway?
Good question. Obviously, because it was Pack Expo East, it was a little more regional based. So it's smaller, a little more intimate. Those are relative terms. I think there were 7,000 attendees, 500 exhibitors. So it's smaller than the international show we had in Vegas, obviously, but it's more regional. So you'd have a lot more attendees from New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, locations like that. And their challenges are similar to what we hear everywhere, but they're a little more concerned because they're a little more smaller focused. We didn't see as many of the larger manufacturers. There were still a few large names there, but not as many. It was more regional based. So that was interesting. And one of the things I like to do is, as you know, with these types of shows, there's breakout sessions, there's lectures you can attend. And I want to see what the options are. And with the way our booth was set up, we had close proximity to them. So I could walk over and see who's really attending these, because unfortunately, if you're a presenter, some of them are poorly attended and you feel bad for them. There's in a room with 3 people and they're trying to give a formal presentation. But I had written down, so I took notes here, some of the topics that jumped out at me at this one, which I think, again, I've only been in this for a couple of years now, but they seemed a little more trending in one direction. I won't tell you where that direction is. You can kind of figure it out. But the first one that had a really good attendance was how to survive and thrive during the skilled trades crisis, which shockingly, we know that one. That was very well attended, had good reception, so that was good. How to solve labor challenges with robotic solutions. So that I kind of eavesdropped on that one. The solution to the labor problem is more robots. So that's another conversation we can get into. Overcome common challenges and preventative maintenance with 6 proven steps. That was a long title, and I actually registered for that one, so I wanted to see what that was about. And the takeaway there was planned maintenance is not getting done because of time and people. So there's not a magic pill. The magic pill is put a plan in place and follow with time and people. So that could have been a 30-second presentation. The last one was interesting, trends in remote service and monitoring. And you've been in this industry for a long time, but since COVID-19, they cannot get staffing back to where it used to be. So the solution is to go with remote technology. So I saw those seem to be the 4 of the ones I walked by the most heavily attended and engaging. So there seems to be a shift going in that direction of technology, people moving forward. So,
yeah, would you say that is the trend in those all kind of just this continued challenge of the workforce overall, maybe different approaches or different thoughts in speaking into how you solve that, like you say, whether it be with technology or whether it be, with, obviously in our case, in augmenting maintenance teams, some of the other, like you said, some of the remote ideas of where, okay, is there a way to solve this problem externally, which is kind of a technology play as well. But it sounds like not to be self-serving, based on what we do, but the reality is all of those are kind of centered around that workforce challenge, even the preventive maintenance piece of it, obviously, specifically, maybe that one.
Yeah, I think, obviously, again, we know what we do, but again, whether it's in what we do, if it's technology, there has to be an urgency to embrace change. Whatever that change is, whatever is going to work for you and your facility, you have to embrace the change because we'll jump into it here, but I've had a lot of conversations with folks there and they're all struggling in one way or the other. And the common consensus, if there was one consensus, is what we used to do, we can't do going forward because we're going to get swallowed up.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's interesting in a recent podcast, we were talking about, we're doing a series on HR, and this one was on, I believe, attracting talent, I believe. And we had interviewed a gentleman on that who's the president of the Vices Group. And I thought it was a good thought. I think it was a real thought. And that is that coming out of the Industrial Revolution, which, so you're talking, 40s, 50s, 60s, that era, the way that you solved this labor, this maintenance specifically, but labor in general, is just way different. A lot of those facilities were built, closer to population at that time. The people would go to work for those companies, and that's where they would retire from. And what he was kind of alluding to is we still have companies and people. I know, Mike, when we were out at Pack Expo East, I remember talking to a company. It was a 100-year-old company. They're one of the largest. They can like black beans and dry beans and that type of thing. And this gentleman, he was a younger engineer, had been there, and he was talking about that. It's a challenge to get them to change the reality that the way that we used to find talent or the way that we used to solve these problems is just different. And that's what this Tom Koznick's his name, he was kind of alluding to that, is that it's a very slow educational process that we live in every day to get companies to embrace the reality that it's not bad, it's just different, as we say, the way you're going to solve it.
Yep, it's different. One of the individuals I spoke with, one of the most interesting conversations I think I've had since I've been in this industry, he came by and, how this typically works, just having conversations, tell me what you do, tell me what your challenges are. And I won't give the name or the location, but he was a retired maintenance manager, successful maintenance manager, retired, and a U.S. owned company, brought him out of retirement to help get them into the next century. And this company, based in the United States, senior management in the United States, all operations in a third world country. And he said this is not an exaggeration. They pay their employees $2 an hour to hand sift ingredients. He said they don't have so much as a conveyor system, and they've been able to compete in that market because of low wages going to third world countries. And he was brought on to solve the problem, which is how do we compete? So he's at Pack East looking at conveyor systems and the idea of robotics. I mean, that's just beyond foreign to them. And I wrote down a quote. He said, everyone at this show is trying to compete with everyone else. And while they aren't paying $2 an hour to hand sift, they also don't have the skills, people, or technology to compete with the very few large manufacturers. He says, I don't know if my company is going to survive. And they've been around a long time because they've been so slow to adopt change that now they're trying to play catch up. And if you want to not get swallowed up, you have to try to get out there in front and embrace that change. And I was floored that still exists. But with a shrinking world, that technology is going everywhere. And you can't just think, well, we're going to do some offshore and $2 an hour labor, because that won't compete.
There's a Deming quote that says, change is not required, success is not mandatory. And I think that's the reality for a lot of these organizations, whether it's technology, whether it's the way we attract talent. I mean, it's evolving. In the manufacturing space, which is obviously what Pack Expo East is all about, and it's where we spend the majority of our time, is in the industrial maintenance or in the industrial manufacturing, and then, supporting it through, industrial maintenance technicians. They've been historically probably slower to change, but now you go, if you think about it, Mike, just some of the, maybe speak for a minute, just the general makeup of not just the attendees, but the exhibitors of what we saw there. There's a lot of technology in play for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You'll see, just across from our booth, there was, robotics palletizers, and you and I were having that conversation. I was kind of picking your brain on how palletizers work now versus how they used to work. And you'll see that. Then you'll see some of the saran wrap type manufacturers, but it just seems like everybody's moving towards technology and the robotics, and everyone that would come to our booth, regardless of what they did, small, large, single product, multi-product, they were going over and having those same conversations with those robotic companies saying, help me, show me how to get there. So I think the level of sophistication is going to continue to move at a rapid pace, whether you're the exhibitor or the attendee. And those conversations are going to a much higher level. So the questions they ask are much more sophisticated. Again, the questions they're asking of us, luckily we had one of our recruiters there who deals day in and day out with the top talent that we have in the industry. And the questions that they were asking her and the questions she was asking them about what they need, it's not just, I need a basic maintenance mechanic. No, they're looking for specific high skill set people. So
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. I think probably one of the more common conversations that we get into. And then, trade shows are, I hate to say fun because they're not that fun, but, from a standpoint, they're work, but they're fun from the standpoint that you get to have face-to-face engaging conversations with people. And, when we present, at these shows, one of the things Cap Chatfield, who does our communications at these shows, I know at the beginning he talks, this sounds very doom and gloom, but there's hope. Yep. And so I think that's where it is fun to be able to engage people in this conversation about there's hope. There's a path forward, to solving this shortage. Now, the reality is, though, it's kind of back to that survival that we just talked about. You have to make a decision to change the way you're doing it. You've got to adapt or adopt, technology. You've got to look differently at the way you're going to then attract the talent. Because the reality is, like you just said, they're not coming. A lot of them are still looking for just a basic industrial mechanic. That's still, every facility still has conveyors and bearings and belts and all those types of things. But they also have that robotic arm, and they have that everything's PLC, and in the more sophisticated plants, everything's connected. And so they're looking for that higher level of talent. I think a very common conversation, that we have is, are you looking for just people, or are you looking for talent? Where is your shortage? Is it you don't have enough people, or you don't have enough of quote unquote the right people? Right. And almost always when it really comes down to it, they just don't have the right people.
They don't have the right people. And I'm going to lump the two of us in this group, but it's an aging population, yep, right? In this industry specifically. One of the individuals, he said, he was a plant manager. He said, I kid you not, the average age in our facility is 65.
Yeah.
He goes, and I've got some 25-year-olds. So do the math. Now, if you look at that, and we were talking about their challenges and how we solve the challenge, and it goes back to, you have to embrace a change, whatever that change is. You have to embrace something and make a pivot. You have to course correct, whether that's in terms of the skilled and the talent. Is that formal education with your team? Is that on-the-job training with your team? Is that integrating proficiencies to upskill the team you have? You have to do something. Had a great conversation with a gentleman from a community college, and he probably talked to us for 45 minutes. He had 2 students with him who were community college students, and he was talking to us about the next generation. And yes, there are some generational folks younger who are going to go that direction, and that's going to save us, hopefully. But until then, until we get 5-10 years down the road and we start to bear the fruits of that, what are we going to do to keep those people going? Again, on-the-job training is an infusion of efficiencies. If we don't embrace something, then we'll see who gets left behind.
Yeah.
Is the skilled labor shortage hurting your company's bottom line? Skillwork is the premier staffing agency focusing exclusively on skilled labor. Our team of highly skilled workers augments your existing teams for elevated impact and decreased downtime. Partnering with hundreds of facilities in more than 30 states, we deploy our traveling industrial technicians to work for you on a contract basis. Our philosophy is simple: to honor God in all we do, bring respect back to the skilled trades, and positively impact those around us. For more information on how Skillwork can deliver the top labor talent you need, visit skillwork.com or call us at 402-447-7058. Call us today to see how Skillwork can work for you.
Was that kind of along that line, Mike? What other conversations did you hear as far as how companies are addressing their need, their shortage? Obviously, like you said, upskilling. Anything else? Any other conversations? I know I had, at least one conversation I can share here in a second about just what are they doing to solve this issue.
Well, I heard a couple of them that I know don't work. One of them, and I may be wrong, but this is the first time I noticed there were several lenders there and private equity groups.
Yep.
Just walking around, and I was having a conversation with one, and obviously, he said, well, I can't help you. But I said, so what are you looking to attract here? And he said, well, facilities need to expand. And with the current market and interest rates, they're struggling. And his take was the only way for them to succeed would be to expand. So you have to expand your operations, and that's going to take an infusion of capital. And I said, well, what about becoming a little more efficient? Because every facility I talk to, not all the lines are running. They're not operating at full efficiency. And he said, they've tried, they can't improve that. So we can help them expand. I'm thinking, well, that's probably not the solution. It's one solution. The other one, which I don't think works, which this was the most interesting conversation I had, was they worked on an arrangement with the local prison. If the prisoners getting released have gone through so much trade school training in the prison, they will hire them. And if they last for 3 months, they get a pretty sizable bonus. I said, well, how's that working out for you? He said, not too well. They don't have the skills, and they have a high recidivism rate, so where they go back to prison. I'm like, okay, so what else are you doing to attract talent? He goes, that's pretty much all we got. I'm like, well, I don't know if the prison route works. The other one, which was, we haven't heard this before. It was an Italian company. They manufacture equipment and do installs. They're flying workers from Italy to come in and do the installs and train their staff. But that's cost prohibitive because it costs a bit of money to get an Italian to fly here and spend, a few months. So that's a couple of the approaches. Again, I go back to the community college individual I talked to. What they're doing is they're flying him out on weekends when he's not teaching to do PLC installs and training. And again, he even said it costs him a lot of money to pay me to go do that on the weekends. So it goes back. I wish there was something new under the sun, but there's not.
Yeah.
But I would say it's creative, whether it's capital, whether it's prisoners, whether it's, the community college professor, everyone's trying something new.
Yeah, I agree. I think those shows are interesting. This Pack Expo East, which, kind of shared at the beginning, there's 500 exhibitors versus, I don't know how many are at the big international shows, but they're predominantly, at least in the area where we were, lots of equipment. And so I think, a lot of the operations, a lot of the maintenance teams, their companies have sent them there to look at what's out there. What can we do to automate this and to automate that? Because clearly we can't find the front-end labor. Then as they're walking through, we're in the mix of this, and they begin to have a conversation with us, because the reality is that technology solution comes with a problem. And that problem is, now that plant that said their average worker is 65 years old, they're probably going to opt to retire before they figure out how to continue to upskill. If you're 68 years old and you've been doing this for 40 some plus years, and you're a great mechanic and you're very committed, but to all of a sudden say, okay, now I'm going to totally learn all the technologies. It's this challenge, which I think is why, at this show in particular, we had so many really good conversations, because it is the reality of, if I do this, I kind of make my problem even worse because I don't have the talent. I've shared on other podcasts right before I started, or in the process of starting Skillwork, one of the things that confirmed to me that the opportunity was clearly there and we needed to step into it. The question was whether our solution would work. Obviously 5.5 years in, we're helping a lot of companies, but that was a conversation with a very large, I won't mention him by name, the CEO of this very large poultry company, who said, we have invested millions and millions of dollars in our facilities and technology that is now sitting idle because we don't have the talent to fix it. So he said, what you're doing, getting the talent to these facilities, to the companies who will recognize that you're not going to open the door one day and there's going to be 6, automation technicians just waiting, to go to work. You're going to have to bring the talent to you. But I think that's the interesting part. That's why I enjoy these shows. They're there. They're not coming to these shows looking to talk to us. They're coming to these shows looking at the next advancement in the equipment, packaging, this, that, and the other. And in that process, we get to have a conversation about what is their biggest problem, and that is the workforce.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love the fact that, to your point, they don't come to the show to seek out Skillwork to find out what we do. But in the process of that conversation, you find out what their challenges really are. it's almost as if there's a resignation of, well, I can't solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So let me find a better piece of technology to fix my problem. And I think it's a two-pronged approach. And again, I want to sound like a commercial, but that's what we do right now. We come on site for that equipment that's not being used, those efficiencies that aren't being met, and we help you. But again, going back to the professor, and he had those two young men with him, that's the future. Mm-hmm. And it was a great solution. Both those young men were students hired by different companies, sent to school, tuition paid, 20 hours a week in the facility at $22 an hour. That's good money for a student who's also learning his trade. And both those young men were excited about where they were going and what they were doing. 2 different trades, 2 different facilities. And they said, and they made the joke, we're locked in for a few years there, but we're excited about that. That's how you get in front of it in 5 years. But right now, that piece of equipment that's not being used, those efficiencies that are not being met. Again, I love those conversations because you start to see that moment on their face when they realize, wait, there is a solution. It isn't complete doom and gloom.
Yep. No, you're right. There's a lot in that conversation there. If you want a guaranteed employment path, through furthering your education, it's clearly in the trades. Now, that's not for everybody, but for those that it is, where take the opposite, you take somebody that's graduating, after their 5th or 6th year from that 4-year education, it really has no idea, okay, now what? Now what am I going to do? That's not the case. Obviously, I'm painting with a broad brush. Lots of people that are going to come out of that 4 or 5-year education with a clear path as well. But in the trades, if you are going and getting a 2-year of which somebody will pay for, and then there's no doubt you have a job, chances are the company, like you just said, with these 2 young guys, they know exactly what, and they're getting paid. They're schooling paid and getting paid while they do it. We say it, we have to all continue to push that and invest in that and encourage that, both from companies, from our side, and everybody. The reality of that, and we say it at Skillwork, the only challenge is a lot of that is a tomorrow solution for a today problem. We can't get enough of them through that process to even scratch the surface of the size of the problem. So we got to use that and other ways, to kind of track people or take some of the talent that is already out there and get it to where you need it if you're willing to recognize that there's an option. So kind of in closing, Mike, what any final thoughts as we put a wrap on Pack Expo East and get ready to ship our booth somewhere else to the next one?
Off to the next one. No, I appreciate the opportunity to go to this conference. Again, it's always fun to get out there and just talk to the folks who actually have boots on the ground, hear their challenges, potential solutions, hear great ideas again. And you go into thinking just a little bit more, then you realize you don't know that much because it's a very large industry with a lot of interesting challenges and opportunities. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
No, it is. So, well, hey, we appreciate you joining us here today. As always, we hope that this was, helpful, that the conversation resonated in some way. If you're in this manufacturing space and you weren't at Pack Expo East, but you'd like to learn more about what we do at Skillwork and what we're talking about here, we'd love to hear from you. You can check us out at skillwork.com. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day and God bless. This is Brett Elliott, CEO and co-founder at Skillwork. Prior to starting Skillwork, I spent over 30 years in the food manufacturing space. From literally starting out cleaning the restrooms to becoming the maintenance manager, then the plant manager, to eventually becoming the president and owner, I've seen the manufacturing world from many perspectives. And like many of you, I've seen firsthand the growing need for higher skilled workers, while at the same time experiencing the shortage of this skilled talent. I started Skillwork to address that need. I knew the headhunter and the local temp agency models were not the solution. If you're experiencing the same shortage of talent at your facility, we would love to connect you with our team. Give us a call at 402-447-7058 or visit us online at skillwork.com.